Thank you so much for your time today, Bukky. And I'd like to first get your thoughts on what we saw play out in the OMO auctions yesterday.
Well, we already anticipated the move by the central bank, so it was not that much of a shock, if I would put it that way. I mean, it was expected that the central bank would try to, address the rate at which the inflation rate had been going up. So there was a need for a monetary policy response. And I believe that the increase of the OMO rate to 10% was one of the initiatives by the central bank to address that. What that has done to the market is opening today, we've seen an increase in yields, both on the treasury bill space and on the bond side as well. We've seen an increase of about 100 to 150 basis points on the bond yield, and then for the treasury bills market, particularly on the long end, we've seen an increase in yields by about 400 basis points. The short and medium tenor yield curve has remained quiet.
All right, but let's look at how the market has played out this week so far, just before we saw that OMO auction play out. Can you speak to the sentiments we're seeing play out and what you expect from sentiments going forward into next week?
So for the markets overall, we had witnessed buying interest in the bond market opening the week. This was a continuation of the trend we had seen in the previous week. So because yields had increased overall between last year and now, and the medium and the short end of the bond curve was trading above 10. So we saw clients coming into the market, to buy at double digits, which is something we've not seen in a while. Up until yesterday, even while the OMO auction was on, we had still witnessed demand, even though the demand had trickled, but we still saw a few demand in the market yesterday. On the bill space, however, it had remained bearish for the most part of the month and even in the month of January. So the OMO auction just added to the bearish sentiment in the treasury bill space. So we're not seeing a lot of activities there. However, on the bond side, the demand has fizzled out today and the market has generally remained quiet. Going into next week, we expect that because of the bond auction, which is expected to hold this month, we expect that players may want to wait and see what happens at the bond auction before any type of demand would, trickle back into the market. Because our expectation is that if CBN had increased yields, the probability that DMO would also be willing to increase yields is very high. So market players would want to see what DMO's plan is before we see any activity in the market. So we think that market is going to remain very bearish and very quiet until the bond auction.
All right, but Bukky, let's look at what the central bank has been doing to try and, attract and retain, foreign interest, offshore interest in our local instruments here. I'd like you to speak to some of the moves that we've seen done, and some we've seen by the central bank.
Well, what the central bank has been doing with the offshore investors is that I think the supply of foreign currency to the offshore interest had reduced opening the year. So CBN has not been meeting the demands of the foreign investors. And I also believe that the plan to increase OMO rates to 10% was to sort of placate some of these investors, that pending when the CBN is able to meet their needs, they would take the OMO rates up such that the foreign investors would be compensated at least, because they would then be able to hold the naira they have in a high yielding instrument while they wait for the central bank to sell dollars to them.